Hello, guys. So, I decided to make a new video because the system intrigued me. Rational Feeds Evaluation System, or RFES by ICNEF, or also Burl on Discord. I decided to make a video about this because I read till here, maybe, till his fourth point, and I decided that what he's saying doesn't make any shred of sense. And you probably already know my opinion about scaling systems in general if you watch my How to SCD part 1, where I addressed it in the first part itself. Actually, I do not endorse any particular scaling system of SCD. I think they are all redundant. I think they boil down to simple logic, and we can argue on logical grounds which logic is more cogent, which logic makes more sense, and which logic ultimately applies more to a particular situation. So, like scaling systems in general, do not make sense. But I've read this one, and this one is just straight up terrible. So I decided to just react on it, make it a series basically, or something like that. Me reacting to like dumbasses in SCD, like I did with Leela, but that turned out to be a troll, which I was pretty much aware of anyway, but was pretty funny. Okay. Uh, Let's start then. This scaling system was created with the idea of not judging how smart a character is based off of things that they are easy to write and make them seem smart, such as stating IQ numbers or having them with unreal charisma, etc. So he's basically saying that he's gonna evaluate characters that are hard to write, depending on their intellectual skills, and judge it based off that. But why? Why do you view it from an author's point of view? Because at that point, you're just killing the intelligence of the author, not the intelligence of the characters that are portrayed by the author. So you're actually not killing the characters; you're killing somebody completely different. So that's faulty, right? That doesn't make any kind of sense. Like, sure, like I can grant. I know some people will disagree, but I can grant that some people or some characters are unrealistic, right, or even illogical. Like, I think that's entirely possible. I mean, maybe not illogical, but maybe basically doing certain actions that can be explained using logic, but cannot really be justified using logic, right? That's kind of the gist of it. But these characters, they are still written in such a way that it makes them conceptually impossible based on the narrative, based on the feats, based on the statements. Basic narrative as a whole. Narrative is a story, right? Narrative is like storytelling, essentially. So everything that's in a story is a narrative. That's also one thing that people in SEO need to learn. And so you need to encapsulate everything that is in a narrative and scale it appropriately, not just handpick the things that you think is relevant, right? Or handpick the things that you like to scale about the character. So that's just idiotic to scale it from an author's point of view, because at that point you're scaling the author and not the character that is being portrayed. Besides, if a character is stated to have like a million IQ, right, or like perfect foresight, that and maybe foresight is not a really good idea, but let's say if a character is stated to be able to deceive anybody he wants, right? In that case, that's a statement, right? But it's kind of lazy from the author's point of view, right? It's very easy to write it. Okay, why does that make any conceptual difference as to how does that affect the scaling in SCD, right? Because he still has that statement that he is able to deceive anybody, at least in his own universe, in his own verse, right? So granting that, which is literally said by the author, because it's written by the author, then you're contradicting yourself by saying it's basically viewing it from the author's point of view, because the author's point of view is that he actually wanted to make the character be that way. And whether it's poor writing or not doesn't matter, because we are not scaling writing, right? Okay, I talk too much about that point. Let's just go further. Not taking into account plot armor, unrealistic feats. A feat is realistic if there is a cause and an effect, and the probability of the relation being valid. Wait, what? See, he cannot even properly conceptualize sentences. if there is a cause and effect and the probability of the relations being valid has high probability of happening or how much of a that doesn't make sense. Come on, bro. You are making a document, at least make it logically coherent. Like, make it obvious what you're trying to actually convey with this. Okay? And unrealistic feats obviously also have a cause and effect. It's just that the cause and effect is not really accessible to us. It can be ineffable for sure. Like, you don't need to explain why or what kind of cause and effect relation there is, but by necessity, there must be by necessity some kind of a cause and effect relationship, because that's how world works, right? And not just only ours, but it kind of has to. A fictional world must also kind of work like that, right? It just kind of needs to be on the basis of cause and effect for everything to even work, right? So, like, you cannot attribute this to real life, but you can certainly attribute it to fiction. The cause of some character being infinitely having infinitely good deception, right? The cause of that could be that it's intrinsic to him, which means that birth was actually the cause of his powers in this case, right? That's a cause and effect relationship. That's completely unrealistic, but it has a cause and effect. And similarly, you can make a causal relation to literally anything, right? So yeah, value of feats. This is long. Uh, okay. It's an absolute that is relative to the knowledge of the characters the person has. Okay, sure. That's kind of goofy wording, but okay. Okay. So, the idea that you determine the winner of a matchup based on how many categories does the character take is kind of retarded, right? Because when you have a good logical reasoning, take for example, or good EQ, right? When you have good EQ and good logical reasoning, you are probably not going to get manipulated. And it doesn't really matter how strong the manipulation actually is by the person you're facing against. It is a category that works in such a way that limits the manipulation effects, at least to a certain extent, right? So some categories work against each other. When you are good in one category, then it is really hard for other person to manipulate you or deceive you through certain categories like deception and manipulation, right? Some categories work against each other. So if you're good at X, then even if your character is really good in Y, he will still probably have a lot of issues because he needs to. It would be way more efficient to deal with you in a particular way that is outside of, for example, manipulation. Going back to the analogy I posited, right? And there's also one more issue, is with strategy and planning that I have specifically. There are certain cases where you just don't need a strategy or a planning by default looks at all the cumulative categories that a character or that a strategy or a planning has, right? So every strategy feat, every planning feat will have aspects of all the categories that actually we use to scale strategy and planning. And here's the thing. Even if there are, for example, even if a plan has no contingencies, the fact that there is no contingencies, it is still a relationship to the category of contingencies, even if there is none, right? So every strategy, every planning feat has already an effect on the categories that they use. And here's the catch. You might create a plan. You assess that your characters or your opponents are not good enough to actually counter your plan as it is. And so, with that in mind, if you have a really good psychoanalysis, if you really know who you are dealing with, there is no further need to actually make any contingencies. And in fact, when you make more contingencies, arguably, it would make your plan or strategy way harder to implement in practice, right? Because you are just adding additional unnecessary things that make the realization of a plan way more complicated than it should be, and it's way more than enough in certain cases to just have no contingencies. A perfect example of this is Kokichi in his chapter 5 plan, right? Where he basically had like one contingency or like none at all. I don't really remember it right now, but from the top of my head. But the point is, he had practically no contingencies in the plan. But even if he had like 15 contingencies, that the impressiveness of the category or of the feat will not change whatsoever. It will be exactly the same, right? And in fact, I would argue that if statistically on paper he would have good feeds in contingencies, it would make the entire feed as a strategy worse. Because imagine that you are in a time pressure, right? You need to you need to come up with a strategy or a plan fast, and we're thinking too much, overly being so lenient on these cases where you want to implement everything and stuff like that, you will be put under a really huge pressure. And characters like these, they wouldn't perform well in a situations where there is little time, right? So having a feat like that, even if it's on paper more impressive because it takes more categories, is inherently flawed. Because in certain situations, it will actually be a demerit. And in certain situations, on like classic situations where you have the necessary time, the impressiveness is actually exactly the same, right? Because it has the same probability of achieving a particular goal, if not if not even better when you make it easier. So I would actually argue that in certain cases, taking more categories is actually worse than taking a few categories. So you cannot scale strategy and planning based on that. Okay, that's that. Forced feeds. This okay. Just from the title itself, I think this will be a gem. This will be a really idiotic. So I'm looking forward to it. Would be to set up the right conditions for it to. Wait. Against the. What? What? No, that's not how it works. Okay, even if the situation is exactly written down by the author, that doesn't make a difference to how smart a character is. Why should that count as a demerit of the feat that they are using? It just means that they just managed to basically employ the strategy or a plan in a situation that warranted it, right? Because you're from a good, you are located in a good position to actually execute your strategy or set your plan in motion, right? So when you are located, even by chance, even if it's completely random, if you are located in such a position where you are able to implement your thoughts and your strategy, that it makes no logical, coherent sense. Why should it count as a demerit of the feats that you're using? That's just so bad. Okay, okay. He provides an example. They rely on little details here, and they were meticulously put in a kind of blatant way to help with the case. Okay, I see. Well, if the details were put in a blatant way, and you can prove that they were in a blatant way, then the feed is just not that good. That's all that it means. It doesn't mean that the feed is forced or whatever. It just means that the feed he did is actually not as good as you think it is. Okay, it has nothing to do with forcing feats or whatever by the author. It just means that he had written Conan to be in such a way where his feed, this particular feed that you're describing here, I'm not sure what this feed is, but this particular feed is just not really good. Okay, that's all there is to it. It's not that deep, my guy. Uh, okay, that doesn't really matter. Um, Repeated feeds. Feeds, especially in strategy, they can be repeated, but at the end, they can only count as one. Same manipulation methods over and over. It depends. I don't think this is a really bad point. Like if a character uses the same kind of method against different kinds of people, then I guess you can just make a case for consistency, right? But in general, it probably wouldn't change a lot about the impressiveness of the feat. But if you are using the same method, but you're using them on the same person twice, then obviously that highlights how good your method actually is, right? When you can manipulate them twice using the exact same process, exact same method, exact same methodology. It just really showcases that you are able to consistently manipulate same people using the same method. Okay, so it actually highlights or heightens your feat to a further degree because you can do it consistently and you can do it even to the same person, which is important because it actually shows that your manipulation method, even if that's the only manipulation method you know, even if you're not versatile, that shows that this particular manipulation method is actually really good. Okay, so yeah, knowledge case, uh, real creative. Okay, so that he's just going back to this idiotic rule. I think here. Let me see though. This is because yeah, of rule 0. Yeah. Okay. I will not comment on this because I think I said enough about this rule 1 shit. So also don't want the video to be 2 hours long because we have a lot to absorb. So not taking into account direct statements. Yeah, I think I talked about it in point 0 as well. That's just really stupid because then you're just scaling the author and not the character that is being portrayed. And not taking into account indirect statements, this is like stop scaling on drugs. Holy shit. Uh, I made up this term. Yeah, I can see that, bro. It's not worth anything. Wait, what? Any situation of a fact that is made up isn't worth anything. What does that even mean? Uh, Advantageous supposed feeds. Uh, Saying that. Okay, whatever. Okay. Making a character super resistant to emotional pressure, anyone would have felt it for in real life. So overall, just easy to write feeds. If you write a character in such a way that makes it easy to write, while writing wise lazy, it doesn't take away from the intelligence of the character in question. It just doesn't take away. It just doesn't do that. Okay, it's that simple. It doesn't do that. You're scaling once again. You would be scaling the author of the story, not the character that is being portrayed, right? So that's just really dumb. It's like a book writer. Taking an analogy to a book writer, right? A book is written by a particular writer, and there is a certain character in the book. Take like James. Okay, his name will be James, and he's really small. He's like tiny in height. He has like feminine features, right? And then you say, oh, so the author actually wanted him to be feminine, right? And so you like derive certain conclusions about the character, about the author's intention within the story. But You need a really good confirmation from the story itself to actually make this valid, make this line of reasoning work. And this is actually my analogy is actually not even that good because this case is really obvious that I presented. In the case that you usually encounter in fiction, it's way more harder to decipher the intentions of the author. And so, even scaling from an author's point of view is quite. It can lead you to huge issues like since the very beginning. So yeah, off-screen feeds count only the situation that they have built upon its reason explainable, like a lot. Mm, that's just redundant, but I agree with that. Off-screen skins can only be valid if it's reasonably explainable. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't need to be within like without a shadow of doubt. Of course, you can always posit like hypotheticals, but we need to look at like theoretical virtues, right? Instead of like like some kind of intransigent probability. Like it wouldn't really make sense. So just like the first thing, I agree with him in a lot of words. Nice. Creation of a cat called consistency. Mm, uh, okay, that's like assuming that his scaling system works. I think this is fine, but his scaling system is like really garbage, so no need really. There's nothing more to comment on this. Um, Wait, what? Only case that could be taken into account for a comparison of a character with another one is when a character does a reasoning feat and the other character is clearly on the line with the same thoughts in the same moment. Wait, what? Uh, what? I mean, when you are scaling characters, you have to have a certain relative measure, right? And so, if you want to scale characters and how smart they are, you need to compare them to certain characters. So, what do you mean? You can only take into account comparison of a character with another one if they fulfill some reasoning feat criteria. Like you don't even do SCD at that point because you're not comparing characters. This is so idiotic. This is genuinely the worst point that I've heard. This might be worse than illogical fallacies. This goes against the very principles of SCD logic, and what we try to build from SCD. This is insanely, ridiculously idiotic. And mind you, I've interacted with this person on Discord, and he's making takes, he's making comparisons between characters. So he's not abiding by his own scaling system. How stupid that is. Jesus Christ. Okay. Uh, how good the thought itself about the phase they do is. I mean, sure, I don't have a problem with that. The problem with powers is that people with powers, or some people tend to limit or think that when they set the characters that have like intrinsic powers, then that feat that they are using actually is worse somehow. But I don't think that's the case. I'm not too keen on like results. I don't really like placing too much importance on results, on the achieved results. I'm a really huge proponent of methodology above all. Like in certain cases, you can even scale a feat using only results. It is possible, but you need to have a specific, very specific conditions to do that. And mostly, in like 95% of the cases, methodology is just way better than using any or making any conclusions about the feats using results of the feats, right? So sure, that's not a bad point. In order to have a good points in a category or subcategory, it is valued more how good the feet in the cat subcat are, rather than how many of them you have. Yeah, that's pretty obvious, I think. Wait. Why? Okay, I agree with this, with the first part, but why in the hell should that have exceptions? And also, I don't actually really agree with the first part because, okay, here's the thing. I agree with it, but I don't think it's the only thing you need to take into account. You also need to take into account consistency. If there is any consistency in the feed, then that makes actually the quality of the feed better because it's boosted by the contingency. It's like a cluster case of properties of intelligence that where you are better in one, then you're better in another by default, right? But this doesn't make any sense. Why should there be exceptions, like specific exceptions? And not only that, you're trying to posit some kind of rational fees evaluation system, and you don't even explain why there are these exceptions at all. Like you provide no reasoning. That's so weird. Uh, hmm. They are literally R value 0 or counted as anti-fees. Okay, that's so bad. Oh god. No, this might generally be the worst scaling system since stop scaling. But nothing overtakes stop scaling. Stop scaling literally went against epistemic evidence. Like, it was so ridiculous. Like, whatever. But this is like the second worst scaling system that I've seen since stop scaling. Like, genuinely, I have, I don't even know what to say. Like, it's so bad. Let's switch to the method. Okay, let's go. I don't care about that. Uh, okay, so he's trying to like systematize it. I don't think that's good. Wait, yeah, I actually don't think that's good at all because a light mate, granting his analogy, a light could take not. Wait, I just realized he's using 15 reasoning categories. What the fuck? Whatever. I just realized that um, if light takes like okay, let's say the 9 reasoning categories. Okay, if light takes 9 reasoning categories from Yuchi and Yuchi takes 6 from light, then maybe just maybe light beats Yuchi in these 9 reasoning points. All of these 9 reasoning points like extreme diff or very high diff, whereas Yuchi actually beats light in these other 6 like no diff or low diff. In that case, would you still say that light beats Yuchi in mid diff or whatever you're distill here? Intuitively, it doesn't make a shred of sense. It's completely idiotic as well. It's just, it's just so bad. Okay, let's just move on. I'm already cringing. Oh fucking god! Why do you say that you haven't found a system that you like, and you're proposing a literal fucking scaling system here? Are you like? Is there something wrong with you? Okay, Burl. If you want, I can like redirect you to a psychologist, or I can help you myself. Okay, I will not make fun of you. Just reach out to me in DMs, and we can figure something out. Okay, we can. I can teach you things about SCD. Okay, I can tell you how this shit works because seeing this genuinely like mentally hurts me. This is not even actually funny. You don't even apply. You haven't even found a system. You say here, but this document is literally about introducing a system. Like there's something really wrong with you, boy. Like really wrong with you. Let me continue. What? What? Characters who have low points, especially on categories where low points are easier to make, should be basically considered as non-factor. That doesn't make sense at all. If you have weak categories in any category, then that should count as a weak feat, with no exceptions. And you cannot compare an EQ feat to a reasoning feat in terms of difficulty, because you are using completely different methods using both categories, reasoning or EQ, or like strategy and thinking. You're using different kinds of a brain, or well, at least interacting with different kinds of a brain to 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 come up with this conclusion. They are not. You cannot systematize everything into one singular system. FSIQ works differently than EQ. EQ works differently than deception. You cannot do this. You cannot do that. Oh god. Consistency needs to have a change because it would buff too much characters below the screen. Okay, I don't care. Still needs to be a proportional system. Okay. How about this proportional system? This might shock you. This might really shock you. But this system is here for like 3,000 years already. You know what it is? It's called logic. Yeah? So just look into logic. There you go. You have a proportional, intrinsically logical system by which we can evaluate characters. There we go. No need to make these arbitrary, idiotic scaling systems. Like you're just trying to. Whatever. Let me just continue. I don't even know what this means, bro. What? Wait. You say that. Did you seriously just say that all FSIQ feats, all observation, all perception, all memory, knowledge, reasoning, SQ, adaptability feats rely on plot armor? All of them. There is something really, really, really deranged with your brain. I'm speechless. Even Leela didn't make me speechless. I genuinely don't know what to say about this. In my 2 years of being an SCD, this is probably the top 3 dumbest thing I've ever read. I don't think I need to even comment on this, and you people will know that this is. Okay, let me just continue. So many. I don't think I can survive by the end of this document. I will literally suffer. At least half of my brain cells are already gone right now. I think I'm like gradually losing intelligence as I go down the list. Okay. Consistency explanation. Feed and screen time. I don't care about these points. Like I will just ignore them. I don't think it's relevant. Um. That doesn't make a shred of sense. It does. Okay. Take for example that a character that you are sitting on a table, and a character, a smart character, sits down on a table and observes an apple on the table. What kind of feat do you want to do out of that? Like, do you somehow like try to infer that they observe the universe based on like observing an apple on a fucking table. You cannot make a better feat out of that. So just because a character, a really smart character, has some really average observation feat, that's because there was nothing more to observe. Because the observation necessitated for the observer to only to basically observation was just easy to do, and there is nothing more you can observe. So obviously, the feed will be average or bad even, but it doesn't mean that the character's observation is bad, right? So the consistency in question here doesn't make sense at all. Like, it's so stupid, right? Okay, off-screen feeds. Since lots of plannings are off-screen, there is the feed screen time subcategory. Off-screen feeds have to be accounted for, even slightly. You're so funny, little man. Uh, uh, ever, ever feeds. Oh, average feeds. Ever feeds. Okay. We take into consideration on the average quality. Okay, this is the same issue as with the screen and screen time. You cannot just say your character has eight eight feeds, eight observation feeds, and somehow make like a average quality rate out of the eight feeds. It's not logical. You only scale the best feed because that's where his limit of observation is actually shown. Or alternatively, you can present anti-feeds. I know like even like a lot of good scalers and debaters are not really too keen on the idea of anti-feeds, but I think anti-feeds are great. Like when you need to when you want to distill a character or like debuff a character, then bringing up anti-feeds I think is really good. Because it shows that the faculty of observation or manipulation, whatever category that they are using, they are really inconsistent in it, right? And so in certain situations, even if they are of higher peaks, they have higher observation peaks, because of certain circumstances, the observation can be limited and to a huge degree, right? So in certain situations, that really makes them scale way lower based on that, because there is a whole set of situations where a character with worse observation feats can in the end beat them because of this anti-feat, right? So I think that anti-feats are actually good. I know a lot of people don't like them, but I think anti-feats are really useful to note down as well. So if I recommend you, I recommend y'all to do that and not do this or whatever he says. Don't do it, please. Anti-feeds. Oh, anti-feeds. Okay. The fewer the anti-feeds, the better the grade. Uh, I agree with this. Anything here is idiotic. Uh, Nonsense. If something is unrealistic, that doesn't make it nonsense, right? Like, yeah, I wanted to give an analogy, but I think it's pretty obvious why that is the case, right? And I think, if I give the analogy that I wanted to, then my video could be reported. So I will not do that. Any acts that don't consider realistic things that go against them. I don't know what it. I think the first thing just means the second thing, but he just rephrased it. I don't think it makes sense. And then we have like explanation on three categories, reasoning. Uh, so intuition is actually completely separate from reasoning. That's just a definitionary problem, so I will not really go into it. Intuition just doesn't equal reasoning, and there are a lot of ways you can justify this with, because intuition is inherently subconscious, whereas reasoning must, by definition, be conscious. If it's not conscious, it's not reasoning, so intuition is not reasoning. It's kind of a. It's kind of a. Oh, and also, intuition is immediate, right? So it has an immediate reaction on you, but reasoning implies like a set set of inferences that you go through consciously. But intuition is an immediate seeming, right? So it cannot be considered as reasoning. Uh, what? Reasoning main categories are logical reasoning and planning. What? Well, okay. I think you don't know anything. Planning has nothing. Uh, Planning in its pure form. You obviously need to reason if you want to make a plan. But reasoning in its pure form, when it's already done, it requires no reasoning, right? So in order to formulate a plan, you need to use logical reasoning. But then you cannot use that plan, or you cannot use that logical reasoning and scale the plan from that, right? Or I mean, I guess you can, but it's not the logic. It's not logical reasoning that you're scaling. It is supposed to be the plan that you were scaling, right? So it's kind of weird. It's like it's really weird. Like it shouldn't be a subcategory. And besides, logical categories like induction, abduction, and deduction, they they all take a different logical form. They are of different logical form, right? And these are the only three logical forms available. So logical reasoning gets reduced to abduction, induction, and deduction, abduction, and induction, right? So logical reasoning consists already of abduction, deduction, and you just conveniently forgot induction, which is probably arguably the most important logical reasoning category. But okay, I guess you just really don't like induction for some reason. You're so weird. Okay. Yeah, but like this doesn't make sense, and I don't even understand what you mean by that. Like, oh yeah, and also illogical reasoning literally just means you're being illogical. So you don't even use it as a category. You use it as an anti-feat, right? So the only other option is that reasoning is equivalent to logical reasoning. Like that's the only option. So yeah. Yeah. The time a character comes up with a reasoning feat is relevant. I disagree with that. I think we need to take into account the time for sure. I think it's also pretty self-evident as to why. Like, if a character acts, or let's say you have two characters, and they do the exact same feat under the exact same circumstances, and they both, and yeah, and that's it. But one of them does it in 4 months, and the other one does it in 2 weeks. Which feat is better? It's obvious, like obviously, intuitively, we feel like the second character has a much better feat just because of the time frame. So saying it's irrelevant is idiotic. It goes against our intuition, and you better have a really good argument against it. Which reading your document here, this entire document, I'm sure you do not have a good argument against it. So, um, by the way, I'm crying. Where is where is induction, my guy? Can you tell me why you only using deduction and abduction? Where is induction? I'm so triggered just by you not using induction. Like that's crazy. And force feeds, like Jesus Christ. My guy, my guy. In order to logically reason anything, you need to have a level of insight. If you do not have insight, some level of knowledge, right? Insight, I'm not sure how you define insight, but basically a degree of knowledge about something, right? Anything. So you need to have knowledge by necessity to even make a logical reasoning feat at all, right? So obviously, feats that are only insight or feats that are logical reasoning must require insight by default, right? And it doesn't matter how bad the insight actually is. Even observing your screen, or your phone screen, or your computer screen, whatever you are looking at this video from right now, you are observing something, right? You're observing the screen, so it's observation, right? So yeah, I mean, it's really trivial. Any person that is not blind can literally observe a screen, but it doesn't. It's still observation, right? So yeah. Inductive reasoning. Huh. This is tricky because inductive reasoning is not valid because validity is specifically linked to deduction only, right? When we refer to inductive reasoning, we refer to cogency instead of validity. But I don't think you know what is valid, so I think you have it wrong. Just assuming from the way you type this, right? Assuming from the way what this means, you have absolutely zero idea what valid cogency actually means. Okay, so also a lot of feats that are like inductive reasoning or even deductive reasoning or abductive reasoning, they can be semantically reduced to a different kind of reasoning, right? If you're really smart with the semantics, you can turn a deductive feat into an inductive feat, or an inductive feat into a deductive feat. I'm not sure what kind of purpose would it even serve, but theoretically, you can probably get around it with like some sneaky semantic moves. So I do agree with this point actually, that you can technically interpret abductive feeds as inductive feeds and stuff like that. But this is not an anti-feed, obviously. I'm not sure why do you count it as an anti-feed. Like that's idiotic as well. Thinking, uh, cunning. Oh, Jesus, cunning is a thinking category. Let me just. This is so uninteresting as a category. Like strategy explanation. Uh, wait. Strategy. Okay, you can be creative about a plan. You can be creative about the way you think. You can be creative about the way you move, even. You can have creative bodily movements. So creativity is not intrinsic to strategy, so it shouldn't be counted as a strategy category. You can use it as a separate category, but this is not good. And I agree with misdirection, by the way. I will not read the definitions, I will just use the name of the categories. Complexity, sure. Contextual optimization. Okay. That's actually pretty decent. Persistence. That can just be linked to contextual optimization, I believe. But strategy, as a whole, not too bad. And for EQ, he's only using 2 categories. What? Wait, what? Wait, what? What do you mean you didn't count 2? I'm so depressed. This guy is positing voila scaling system, and he doesn't know. He doesn't know shit. He doesn't even know how his own scaling system works. This is so sad. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this for YouTube content? Why am I torturing myself willingly? Oh, Jesus. Okay, last bits. Okay. Definition of too easy to write. Okay, this is gonna be a right. Um. Uh. Yeah. That's nothing wrong with that. That means that it is easy to write, but it has. This just means it's a weak feat. It's an easy feat. It's not like some kind of a force feat, like you say it. Like it just means that the feat is easy. That's all there is to it, right? So yeah, lack of complexity. This is idiotic. Not everything needs to have a long-term vision. Right? So that's idiotic. Not everything has to have a long-term vision. Like not 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 everything is long-term in the first place, right? So um, no, okay, whatever. Uh, okay. All of these things just make a feed worse, right? They make a feed worse. Does it mean that it was easy to write or too easy to write? Not really. Probably, mostly, yes. But again, it doesn't actually tell us much, right? It doesn't really tell us much. So the point of introducing this is quite quite peculiar to me at least. Can smart characters require subjectivity? How do you define subjectivity? Actually, it doesn't even matter how you define subjectivity. Scaling is just objective. Like, it just is objective. Let me put it that way. Scaling a character, right? That means that you are evaluating the intelligence of a character and how would they fare against different characters in different situations. To be subjective it means is to be dependent on the mind. It has a mind to world direction of fit, right? Which basically means that an idea is formulated in your head, and and this idea is trying to be implanted into the world. That's what it means to be subjective, right? But this is where it gets tricky because a character, a mind created a work, right? Like Tomodachi game that is written by the author, right? But when the work is done, it's a piece of work that was created by the mind. But evaluating the work that is already written by the mind requires no further mind to be objective, right? So even if there are no people on the earth, if there are no people on the earth, then there will be no minds, but the intelligence, seemingly the intelligence of Yuichi or Ayanokochi, Kokichi, Lelouch, they will still be the same without a human mind, right? Because they will be the way that they were written exactly on the show. So, therefore, objective. Also, objectivity doesn't imply universality. You 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 obviously cannot make a specific, hyper specific, completely concrete take, right? You cannot be absolutely pinpoint accurate on the truth of a take, but you can get some things right. And if you can get objectively some things right, that means that scaling is objective. It's just not universal. People confusing objectivity and universality way too much. And I think that that has something to do with the code scalars that are confused on their terminology. But I don't want to really ponder over it or accuse anybody from this. I think even good people are confused on this, to be honest, in this community. Objectivity doesn't imply universality. It means that it's just some aspect at least of a particular thing are mind independent, right? And good luck debunking my analogy. I don't think anybody here is that competent to even challenge it. So, especially, definitely not this dude. So yeah, scaling is objective. That's all I must say. Even if it not, but I grant that it's not universal, but it surely is objective. It makes it doesn't even seem intuitive to me to say that scaling is subjective. It's really weird to suppose that to me. So um people yeah. The question of bias also doesn't really it doesn't matter. Like every human is infallible, right? And it doesn't even need to be because of a bias, it can be because of a lack of knowledge, for example. And so because humans are infallible, then everything that stems from their mind and has a mind's overall direction of it is inherently subjective, right? That's all there is to it, really. So, but when the thing that that they have in mind do not the thing does not have a mind to world direction of it, but it has a world to mind direction of it, then we are talking about something completely different. We are talking about something objective by nature. And if it is somehow deranged or derailed by our cognitive biases or lack of knowledge, that doesn't mean that the thing we conceived of initially is subjective. It means that it's still objective, but we just fucked it up, right? We somehow made it false, right? That's all there is to it, really. Okay. I don't think I will record another video for at least 3 weeks because this really took a huge mental toll on my mental health. I feel like I need to recover for like 3 weeks after reading this document. So yeah, thank you for your attention.